When you look at Maine and you see how hard it is for people today to believe, then that's our obstacle. We've got to say, it's alive. What can I do to get government the hell out of your way? Not sit there and put up all these blockades that stop you from doing the things or being the things that you want to be. Just do your thing. And I think that's the goal. I want to get rid of these ridiculous regulations that stop people from being who they are.
David Jones, Republican candidate for governor here in the state of Maine. Thank you very much for joining us on the Robinson Report. I have to say I've had a lot of conversations with people in the last week about the fate of our state and whether or not it can be saved. And there's a lot of people that I've talked with who are having the decision, or trying to make the decision. Are they going to stay in Maine, try to fight it out, or are they going to, pull the the emergency parachute and go move to Florida, go move to Tennessee, go move to Texas?
Yeah.
They're all having some version of the same conversation around their dinner table. Can Maine be saved? Can it be salvaged? Is it worth fighting for? Or should we move to a place that's freer, less corrupt, lower taxes, less craziness in the schools? By virtue of your candidacy for governor of Maine, I have to assume that you've made an answer to that question, which is yes, it can be saved, and that there is still something here that's salvageable. And as a businessman, you, I'm guessing, have the means to escape what's happening in Maine if you wanted to move to Florida or Tennessee. So is this something that you've thought about, and why? Why are you deciding that it can be saved?
Well, I'm a diehard optimist, so I've been told that I'm optimistic to a fault sometimes, but I believe in people. And I've been in real estate. I travel all over the state all the time. I hear all kinds of things from all kinds of people, all walks of life. As you know, I do the radio show with Ray. I've been doing it for 18, 19 years now.
Yeah, so, I think that's how we first met, was sitting in Ray's studio down in South Portland. Yeah.
So Ray's given me the opportunity to sit there and bloviate as much as I want to, and we've had just about everybody from every walk of life you could ever imagine, in the studio, and you talk, and from the President of the United States. We're both getting them.
Yeah, I was to say, Siri's trying to listen into our conversation here. I'll put my phone on silent as well.
But so just to talk about why I believe Maine is salvageable is because I believe in Maine people. I think everybody, when it comes down to it, I don't care if Republican, Democrat, on the roll, Green Party, whatever you are, I think we can easily agree on 7 out of 10 issues. It's those 3 out of 10 issues that are what I call wedge issues, and we got to get them out of the way because they keep using them and we keep taking the bait, and we got to stop. All right, so if we can focus on the things that we want to get done. Hey, listen, it's a win-win, all right? When we win, as governor, I can tell you, I'm as principled as it gets. My mind is, my wife calls me a creature because I just don't change on my positions. And, if I tell you something, yes, it means yes, and no means no. There's really not any gray in my life. But, in talking with the folks all over the state, they tell me the same thing. I want to leave. I'm like, please. Wait till the end of 2026. Let's win this race. Let's win the House. We got to win the House. Let's win the Senate. And let's take the gubernatorial race as well. And then at that point, we can implement policies and reverse some of these things that they've done. I look at it from the outside looking in. I've never held office, and I think that's my best credential. This is my first job interview ever in my life. I've always been self-employed. But I just think that we need to apply common sense and have good principles that people here in Maine. Look, I lived in Bingham, Maine. Very rural town. I don't know if you know where Bingham is.
I know there's some Robinsons. Used to be in Bingham.
Yeah, there is Dana Robinson.
I'm familiar with the Valley basketball team.
Oh yeah, sure. I was there.
I had to watch my cousins go win gold balls while Dexter wasn't exactly doing the same.
Well, that
thing.
was great. That was a great year. I mean, we had 6 years in a row Golden Globes.
Mm-hmm.
I did a downtown redevelopment grant with the federal government, and I made it a matching grant. for the town. So if we got 400,000, we ended up with 800,000, and we divided amongst all the businesses, and made the place look beautiful. It was a great town. Things happened. It was really nice. I was glad to see it, and went all the way up and down Main Street. So, those kind of things can happen. I saw it come to life in Bingham. Why can't it happen in the rest of Maine? And people feel as though the American dream is dead. I think it's so much alive. I'm living proof of that. I'm not a guy that I was a laborer in labor pool. I learned how to, finish drywall. I learned how to build a home, and then next thing you know, I'm building high rises, malls, and shopping centers over a 10-year period. The dream is alive, and it's very much alive. But you got to make sure it's in their hearts. I think that people just feel like it's unreachable. And I always tell them, you've got to, give yourself attainable goals so you don't get frustrated. And then you'll have those feelings of successes, and you can build on those successes to make it great. And that's what we have to do in Maine. It's a great state. The work ethic, it's ingrained in the folks here in the state of Maine for centuries, right? And it's just amazing how they, when I was in Florida and a guy came up and asked for a job, said, "It's from Maine." I said, "All right, you're hired. Just get over there and put your tools on." So we have to bring that back. But so I think that, when you look at Maine and you see how hard it is for people today to believe, then that's our obstacle. We've got to say, it's alive. What can I do to get government the hell out of your way? Not sit there and put up all these blockades that stop you from doing the things or being the things that you want to be. Just do your thing. And I think that's the goal. I want to get rid of these ridiculous regulations that stop people from being who they are. Let's build Maine again. It's as simple as that. And if you believe in people, and I look at myself as a guy that didn't have anything, and I'm able to sit here today and talk about being governor, right? So that means that the dream's still here. And there's so many young people I've taken under my wing over the years in the real estate business and the construction business, and we've worked together, and now they're productive citizens to run their own businesses, beautiful families, and I just think it's the Maine way, and what they're doing in Augusta today is counterproductive. It's just wrong. You look at Maine Care and how hard it is to get off of it. They put all these rules and regulations in the way of bettering yourself. And if you make just a little bit too much, you lose everything. Well, why not come up with a 12-step program that says, hey, look, good, you do this and this and this and this, and you're not wiped out. You're not standing there left out in the shadows again because you're trying to better yourself, right? Look, we're entrepreneurs. Americans are entrepreneurs. Bottom line, I believe in Americans. I believe in Mainers, and I think if we just allow them that opportunity, that we can build this state back again. We can.
Well, there's kind of two threads there that I want to pull on. The first is, you're talking about the revitalization of Bingham and this matching grant issue, and then some of the regulatory obstacles to building here. I guess in my experience in talking with people, it seems like the regulatory obstacles to being entrepreneurial or building houses to solve the housing crisis, for example, for sure that exists. But there's also kind of a culture in Maine where the state government has gotten so big and so expansive. I mean, we've got 4 or 5 different programs that offer grants or tax credits or something for building housing or multifamily housing or, commercial investments, whatever, that the first stop someone goes to, the Was Sardine Cannery out in Eastport.
Sure.
It's for sale right now. Former Chinese marijuana grow. I was talking with a guy who was familiar with it, and he was like, yeah, it'd be a really great place for a development. I wonder if there's any tax money available for it. It's like, well, geez, back in the day, people could just go out and buy a property and develop it. You didn't need to worry about matching grants and tax credits, and then, then you get to the regulatory barriers. So it's like the regulatory barriers, but also this culture where state government in Maine is so big that even like the big construction companies in the state, they're just welfare queens.
Well, it's a go-to.
They're
right,
building solar panels
right.
and wind turbines and their
Which
biggest
I'm totally
customer
against
is
solar
DOT.
and wind, by the way.
I mean, I think anybody who uses electricity, and has to pay an electricity bill is against solar and wind.
Yeah.
But I guess the question is, how do you wrap your arms around the problems that stem from people who are naturally conservative, like, big construction guy, real estate development guy, but are like kind of okay with the status quo of big government in Maine because they're doing all right. You're making $250,000 a year. You're not really that upset about the direction the state's headed in. You're not going to a political rally.
Well, if those funds dry up, then they're still going to want to work and they're still going to do it. I think, the market speaks. And I'm in real estate, so, it's simple. You can ask all you want, but what you end up getting is what the market's going to bear. In the construction business, there's opportunities with tax credits and everything else to build these units are affordable. I mean, it's subsidized. I don't like the word affordable because it's subsidized housing.
Yeah.
But we have a 86,000 home shortage here in Maine. 86,000 homes we can fill if we had them. And then we've got towns standing in the way of allowing these people to do it and invest in our state. So I think that, I'm not a big fan of federal money or state money and programs. Bingham was a very depressed town. It was very bad, and it needed a shot in the arm. So what I did is I bought all the buildings on Main Street, and I 4 or 5 of all the prominent buildings, and then I fixed them up with my own money. All right, and then but the other buildings around it were needed a lot of love, and so I've heard about the grant. I never authored a grant before in my life. I tried. First year I didn't get it. Second year I got it, and then I said, "All right, guys, look, I want you all to have this money. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do let's paint your place, put awnings here, let's do this, let's make our Main Street look good." And everybody ponied up. So they felt like they, had an opportunity to do something better with their town. And they used to joke and say, David Jones who saved the town of Bingham with a can of paint. Well, sometimes that's all it takes. All right, you take an old building and it's
a lot of truth. A lot of truth to that.
And today, like a lot of people that I worked with, have passed, because it was 20 years ago, right? 25 years ago, maybe. And, but the ones that are still alive, I still communicate with, and it's good to see that, but the town has gone back again. And why did that happen? I left the town and, was sold the properties that I had but it just, the people, I don't know, they felt as though nothing good could happen. And that's the attitude. I think, attitude's a little thing that makes a big, big difference, right? So if you believe in yourself, and if we help them believe in themselves and be self-sustaining and give them the opportunity to be self-sustaining, I think they'll take advantage. I think people have pride, don't you?
I do, but I think as much as you might say the American dream is still alive, there's a lot of young people who don't believe that.
That's sad.
And so why? Like, there's a lot of young people who believe that whether it's conservative, Republican, Democrat, liberal, the economy is rigged for the incumbents. The economy is rigged for, the baby boomers who have 3, 4 houses, and that they've given over to a kind of malaise and desperation that they're going to live their entire life as a renter class and never break out of that. And it's killing whatever remains of the entrepreneurial spirit in America. So, why do you think there are so many people, young people, I would say people under the age of 35, who don't share your optimism that the American dream is alive, at least here in Maine?
Well, I think everybody wants to. What did Reagan say? America's built at the dinner table, right? So now you look at this, and it's generational, basically, is what you're saying to me. I'm 69 years old. I know I don't look it. But
I say you look really good for 69. I hope I look that good. I hope I make
it. It's the water in Maine. I drink well water.
I want to make it to 69.
But you look at where their focus has been in school. The school's teaching them the things that they're worried about the environment. We got 80% plus of the state of Maine is covered in trees. All right.
Yeah, they're not really worried about the environment.
No, if they were worried about cut them down and put solar fields up, right?
They're not worried about the environment.
Blow the tops of mountains off,
exactly.
Right?
That's the funniest thing ever.
And then take a check for $100. What do you get? $120 million grant or something?
No, they're worried about subsidizing solar panels that
Yeah.
are made by slaves in China. They're worried about wind turbines
And
that are
that
owned
they
by
have no way of
international
disposing
companies,
of. Right.
or only taxpayer money
Yeah.
to dispose of them. That's what they're worried about. They're worried about crony capitalism and corruption. So
Exactly.
the environmentalists are totally
Crony
morally
capital,
and
yeah.
ethically bankrupt here in the state of Maine. And
It's
they're
horrible.
ruining Maine. They're ruining Maine, and they're bad people.
No,
I think they are bad people.
I hate to, they've given us so much to run on. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
We all know we're here today.
There's a lot of hanging
you and I, because
curveballs.
we could talk about them all we want, because we know that we don't believe in anything really. Someone asked me the other night, is there anything that I would be aligned with Janet Mills? And I'm like, the only thing I can think is I live in the state of Maine and she does. That's it. I mean, there's nothing she's done that I approve of, and her cronies. I mean, everybody in there. I mean, they tried to stop the president from being on the ballot. They wanted to undermine our voting system. They're trying to usurp the Maine Constitution and put ranked choice voting in the gubernatorial election. I mean, what won't they try to do, right, to protect their power?
That's what it is. I mean, it's
power,
raw.
power
It's a raw
money.
power play. But how do you reconcile this? It's Orwellian, and I know that Orwellian in 1984 gets invoked too much these days. But it is truly Orwellian that the individual who was trying to rig our presidential election so that hundreds of thousands of Mainers couldn't go out and vote for Donald Trump, who became the president, Shenna Bellows, runs around in a T-shirt that says "Democracy Defenders" and has convinced herself and might even actually believe that she is a defender of democracy. But she's rigging elections.
She's delusional.
But
right?
there are plenty of people who believe the way she believes.
But
why is that?
I don't know. I mean, like I just can't explain it. And I'm sure, like I do, you have these conversations with some people that might lean that way, and you think, well, can you just explain to me what I'm missing? Show me where I'm wrong, and they just look at you as, oh, Trump's a jackass. Or,
January 6th, Nazi.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
So they can't answer the question. They can't give you an educated answer about why they believe the things they believe, because they don't know why they believe. They just do. They're repeating whatever. And I think it's sad. So, again, young people seem to have been woken up. I have 6 kids, right? My oldest is 48 now. My youngest is 33. And they're all, active American adults with families.
How many of them have stayed in Maine?
I got 3 of them here in Maine, right? And one, he's, I don't know if you ever met John Logan, my son, but super guy.
Oh, sure.
Super guy. You'd love him. You and him would have a great conversation. And but he, he's like, well, I don't like the taxes, Dad. I can't send my kid to school. He's homeschooling his children, and he's got the 3rd one will be here in October. They live within a stone's throw of me, so all my kids are right around me. Christina lives in Cape, and John and Lauren live in Falmouth, so we're all like, one big happy family, and we spend a lot of time together. But when he's saying to me, Dad, I just can't send him to school. I got to teach him at home. But yet we're paying all this money in taxes and, property taxes, and it's getting spent on programs like DEI and CRT instead of, ABC 1, 2, 3, right? Bottom line is they're not educating our kids. And when the head of the Department of Education says, hey, the traditional learning is going to have to take a back seat to,
she's on video saying that.
Yeah.
Pender Macon,
Yeah.
former superintendent in the Brunswick school system, the commissioner for the Department of Education said that social and emotional learning is going to be the top priority. And traditional learning takes a back seat.
And what does that do? I grew up in a different time, and there was racism, and the schools weren't integrated, and then they became the segregation movement happened, desegregation. Then we ended up mixed, and things worked out great. And then no one was seeing color. We weren't seeing color. We were just people, right? Black, white, hot, pink. It didn't matter. You're a person. You're a hard worker. You want to earn your way. Let's do it. In my construction business, I had people from every walk of life, every race you could ever imagine. We never saw that. It was just like, all right, You're here to do a job. Do it. I'm going to pay X amount of dollars. And it was no. But then all of a sudden they started with this DEI and CRT. And now
It does feel like we've gone backwards.
We've gone back.
Do you think that was intentional?
I think it was. Look, what's the rule of war, Steve? Divide and conquer. As long as they divide us, then they're going to conquer. And they've done it systematically. I mean, and I look at it and I think, how did we allow it? We're smarter than that. We were moving forward in a positive way, in a direction that was good for everybody. But now it's like, everyone's seeing color, and for the wrong reasons. And so I don't know. I mean, I think it's a definite strategy.
Well, there's a lot of money to be made in propping up racial and ethnic divides.
Right.
I mean, even here in Maine at the state level, how many NGOs wouldn't be getting taxpayer money and wouldn't even exist if we didn't have falsely encouraged and propped up racial and ethnic divides.
That's right.
If an Angolan asylum seeker learns English, well, he doesn't need the Office of New Americans. He can just use all the offices that the old Americans use, because he speaks English.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the big thing. I adopted a girl from Costa Rica, and Suhey Alvarado, and we call it Suhey Alvarado Yones, but it's Jones, right? But just as a joke. But the first thing I said, listen, you need to speak English. You need to learn how to speak English, and she did. Now she speaks probably better English than I do, and it was a great kid. But I opened up the Multicultural Center in Portland. I don't know if you know that or not.
No, I didn't know that.
I did. It was me and Paul LePage. I did that. And when he was, I think he was running last time, yeah. And it was a great thing. It was interesting. It was private. I didn't ask for any money from the government. I had an office right there, and they reached out to me, and I said, look, hell yeah. I know a lot of people from all different walks of life in different parts of the earth, and they're coming here and they're being disadvantaged because they can't work or not getting, they might have degrees in law, they might be a doctor, a dentist, whatever, engineer, and they can't practice because, they got a 2-year wait, and they were going to put them on GI, and, then, just the whole system, it's broken. I mean, it's, nobody wants to fix it because it's a great way to raise money and gain power. Yeah. So, but what I did, I had one doctor, I think he was from Angola, but he brilliant guy. He goes, I'm working as a nurse's aide in the hospital. I'm a doctor, a surgeon, right? I can't, but they won't let me practice. So, you see those kind of things and you wonder why. The immigration thing, it affects us here in Maine. We have a lot of people from away here. And are they assimilating? Are they my grandparents came from Italy, all right? So I'm Italian with the last name Jones, right? But my mom was 100% Italian, and my dad was the English-German guy. And so, when we came here, we wanted to be an American. My grandfather said, the happiest day of my life was when I taking the oath to be an American in English, right? And he would never speak Italian, right? He was proud that he spoke English. Now, I go into the city of Portland or downtown Lewiston, and I talk with folks, and they don't speak. I can't communicate with them. So how can we coexist, and how do we know what the issues are if we don't communicate? The first thing anybody should do when they come to this country is learn how to speak English, right? And I made sure that Suhey did. But why not? Why isn't everybody doing that? Why aren't we making sure that everyone can communicate? Because we have a failure to communicate.
Yeah,
right?
A big failure. And there is, there's some element of the migrant resettlement policy that the Democrats have handed down over the last 6 or 7 years that is focused on English, but it's 1%, and then 99% is grants and taxpayer money to nonprofits,
The
Medicaid,
NGOs,
all kinds of wasted money flowing into corrupt nonprofits, corrupt Medicaid billing businesses. There's so much waste, fraud, and abuse that people are profiting from that. Those opportunities go away if everyone just speaks English. If we focus exclusively on being able to integrate and speak English, then those things go away. And we talked on a recent podcast with Abdi Iftin, who's a Somali American refugee and a naturalized U.S. citizen, and he expressed the same concern that there are people actively encouraging non-integration because they stand to benefit from it as a gatekeeper at an NGO or in a political office. So it is a challenge. I think President Trump, who you supported in 2016 with the Make America Great Again PAC,
That was me.
and
22,000 votes away from turning Maine red.
Yeah.
That was my effort, and we did it. We kicked butt, and just 22,000 votes, and Maine would have been red. Think of that.
all red, not just the
All
second
red.
congressional
All
district.
red.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
that was fun. I had a lot of fun with that one.
And I think the late Linda Bean,
Me and
God bless her
Linda,
soul, supported you in
joined
that.
on the hip on that.
But thanks to President Trump coming back into office, the border crossings are now basically zero. You've seen
Yeah.
these announcements come from the shelters where they're like, we're closing up because
We don't need it
for some mysterious reason. There's no
It's
more
dried up.
people showing up at homeless camps
Yeah.
in Maine. So it's
Well,
almost
that's
like
leadership.
well, yeah,
I
of
mean,
course.
you know,
we heard during the 2024 election, like Congressman Golden was saying, well, we've got this bill to do something and it's Trump's fault because he's telling Republicans not to support it. This is the only way we can solve the border problem. Trump didn't have any legislation. He just let the federal government do what the federal government is supposed to do and enforced existing law. So that was a lie that Jared Golden told when he was running for re-election.
What do you expect from him?
Well, just to be crystal clear, he was campaigning on a lie that supported President Biden's
and I think they should be held. We can't hold them accountable. That's the problem. Anybody could say or do anything anymore, and they could tell lies 50 times over, and they're not ever held accountable for it. Right?
Well, that's why we can develop podcasts and platforms where we can say, Jared Golden, you were lying. Why were you lying about that legislation? Why couldn't you just criticize the Biden administration and tell them to enforce the law? I mean, the shift that you've seen specifically at the southern border. I mean, it was just like that.
Yeah.
Shut down.
Done.
So
it was like overnight.
Nothing less than intentional.
All they had to do was see he won the election. Boom! It started to dry up. Right.
So, I mean, it was.
I used to hunt down there in
totally
Del Rio,
intentional.
Texas. I've been.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What?
I've been in Texas. I used
Mule
to go
deer
there.
or
No, deer, white-tail buck. Yeah, but you're allowed $2 2 doe, a javelina, and a turkey. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a good hunt. I used to love going down there. But when I saw the pictures of what it looked like, with the influx of illegal immigrants. I was like, wow, what a change. And they were going through the Del Rio Ranch, which is where I would go. And it was fantastic when I went there. But to see it like that and see it, all wearing Biden shirts and camping under the bridges. And come on, people are dying crossing the Rio Grande. It was, the coyotes and everything else that was going. It's just not. It's not a good scene. I'm all for immigration, just legal immigration, right?
Yeah.
My grandparents did it, and he came through Ellis Island. He had 13 kids. He was never took a penny from the government in his life. Raised all his kids. They're all independent, hardworking Americans. And that's the American way. People are not jumping on rafts and swimming to Russia or China. They're swimming here for a reason, because the opportunity to get back to that is really it's alive.
The opportunity to start a business, or the opportunity to get an EBT card.
Well, no, opportunity to start a business. You go if you go into Washington D.C. or you go into any major city, New York City, or you go and you see the people running a business. They're from Korea. They're from Iraq. They're from most Middle East countries. They're there, and they have the opportunity. Why can they do it, and Americans don't want to? Why is it that Americans are not going for that like they are? Is it below them? Look, I say this. When I had no money, I remember how broke. I was so broke I couldn't pay attention. So I had one job. And then if I couldn't make money with one job, I did two jobs. And if I couldn't do it, I did it with three jobs. And I said, all right, this is it. I'm going to, I would do whatever I can. I worked with my hands. And that was the best thing I ever learned. It was a life skill that I could do. I could fix a car. I could frame a house. I could, I could have a lot of abilities with my hands that I learned because I wanted to. And I'm just one guy. Why is it, today if you tell a kid to change a tire, he's like looking like you get three heads. And you wonder why, how are they going to survive? If ever we did have an issue where power wasn't on, or how would they survive?
Well, I think that just
life skills.
In my humble opinion, baby boomers need to take some fault for that. There's a lot of looking at young people today and saying, well, why can't you change a tire? Why can't you start a fire? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? I mean, the schools have not prepared them to.
Absolutely not.
Life
No life
has not-
skills whatsoever.
Life has not prepared them to do it. So it's kind of a problem of modern society's creating. But then to turn to somebody who's 21 or just graduating from college and be like, well, why aren't you starting a business or something?
Right.
It's like, well, they're not equipped to do something like that, and the entrepreneurial spirit isn't inculcated by our school system, really. They're learning, again, like you said, about the DEI and the CRT. So I think it's almost unfair to kind of hector them and say, you live in the best country in America, in the world. This is America. It's free. It's entrepreneurial. Go do something with your life. But at the same time, there is that impulse that you have to take self-responsibility and be entrepreneurial if you're going to succeed. But there's this sense, and I think that there's some reality to it, that the game is rigged.
Well, I totally blame the baby boomers. All right, I totally. Believe me, I think it's sad that we've allowed this to happen. It's like I was telling your friend here. The bottom line is I'm on the back nine. You guys still have a long way to go. You have plenty of holes to knock a ball in, and this is their turn. And if you get somebody that's gone down the path and has fought the fight, you can learn from that. Like it's like wine; it gets better with age, and there's certain things you learn. It's life skills you pick up. But I think it's people are redeemable. I think everybody has that. There's a pride. What do you do to awake the sleeping giant within? Trump did this. I mean, you look at what he's done in inspiring people to take a stand, where no one has ever done that. In a very, very rare. I mean, even Ronald Reagan, I don't think, had the masses that Trump did, and he didn't. He inspired a lot of people, and he instilled a lot of really great ideas into Americans. But Trump has just mastered this, and so if we just ride those coattails and we say to people, "Hey, look, this is an opportunity for you. Nothing's in your way. Do you want it?" All right? They're going to say, "Yeah." I don't think it's that bad. I think that when you all your life you figured you had to get a work permit in order to work when you're 14 years old. You can only work so many hours. The school principal had to sign off on that so you can get a work permit. I mean, I had jobs like as a little kid, whether it was cutting grass or shoveling driveways or stuffing window boxes with holly and pine leaves at Christmas. I figured ways to make a living, have money in my pocket. And I think that everyone given the opportunity, right, and making them realize that those opportunities are there and that government's not going to stand in their way, I think there's a lot of people that will jump on that. At ages 17 to 35, you look, I've my kids are at that age, or maybe a little bit older now, and I talk to them and their friends, and they're fired up. They're like, we want our life. We want to have control of our lives. We don't want the government telling us what to do. I mean, what's those words? I'm with the government. I'm here to help. Run. All right. I mean, because what has government ever done right? I mean, ever. Except for now, we're protecting the border and we're protecting our country. But before, what did they do? What did they do? Can you tell me one thing that they've ever done great?
Well, nothing perfect, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's assume you win the Republican primary, you win the general election, you're sworn in. What is the first 100 days of Governor David Jones?
Well, I'm going to take the first days once I win the election, and then I'm going to go to work that day. All right. I'm surrounding myself with a team of people that are good, not only good. No, I'll say great. Because I don't want anybody that's mediocre. I have already spoken with someone who is an incredible forensic auditor who is going to go through the books and records with my help, and we're going to find everything that's a non-essential program. People say, well, are you going to cut taxes? I'd love to get rid of income tax, but I'm not going to sit here and make promises to everybody. I want to find out what's making this engine run and why we're running out of gas. All right, we're overspending. We're spending money like there's no tomorrow. All right, spending money I don't believe we have. So let me find out what we're spending the money on. What is necessary? What is not necessary? Then once I realize that and we get rid of the non-essentials, then we could look at, shaving down the income tax. And I think, we went up, 65% in the budget since she took office. 65%. It was a 7.1, and then it went to 7.5 under, it was 7.1 for the budget, and then they bumped it up to 7.5.
Talking billions now.
Billions, yeah.
The most
billions,
recent,
right.
The most recent was at 12,
yeah,
12 or 13 billion.
No, well, we're at 11.6 billion right now, and we're going to go to 12. They're going to go back. They're not done, right? So
and this also, I mean, it doesn't account for all the COVID money, the federal money that was
$15.5 billion.
in here.
Poof. $2.1 billion in contracts awarded to as crony capitalism.
Did they
right?
see any of that in Bingham? How's Bingham doing?
No, it's dying on the vine. Rural Maine doesn't see it. It's unfortunate. I mean, that's our Maine too, and second district. I live there. There's some great people up there, and
it's where the people who actually are from Maine live.
That's
because
right.
they've been priced out of the first district.
Well, they used to joke with me and say I was from away, and I had moved up here from Florida, and they thought that was funny because they said, oh, you're a Flatlander. I said, yeah. I said, look at my plate. It says FL. You're right. Mm-hmm. All right, but I believe when in Rome, do as the Romans do. I wasn't there saying, oh, hey, listen, I'm David Jones. I moved to Bingham. We're going to do it my way. No, it's like, well, what's important to you? Tell me what you care about. Well, how can I help? This is just, that's how I am. I listen. I don't preach. I like to. I learn by listening. I'm an auditory listener, a learner, and and that's the way I like to roll. I want to hear what they want. But I think once we get to a point where I know where the spending is and what we can cut, if we can increase the budget 65%, why can't we cut 10%? And then do it 4 years in a row and eliminate the income tax.
Well, I've never heard or been given a rationale for why spending ballooned under COVID, and then once we came to this consensus that there was no longer this public health emergency, it needed to stay at that same level.
Yeah.
Why did we have to maintain what was an extraordinary, world-ending emergency level of spending?
Non-emergency.
Now we just still have to spend that much money.
Yeah.
They've never justified that. They've never been forced to give an explanation for that. We're all just told, sit down, shut up. The Democrats know what's best. Let them do the busy work of government, and people are tired. People aren't.
Well, I think it was a test to see how far
they
they could push us. Honestly, I say children. When I was raised, we always said that children should be seen but not heard. Right.
I've heard that one before.
Right, you've heard that, right?
I wasn't very good at it.
Right. Well, either was I. Believe me, I was the complete opposite of that. I was the one that right? But I say they should be seen and they should absolutely be heard, because some of the most incredible things come out of young people's minds. Youngers. I've told you I have 8 grandkids, and they're all 5 or younger. So I've got a tribe of little. Mm-hmm. Just great kids, right? And but the things that they come up with, I thought hard about running for governor, and then I said, I'm absolutely not going to do this. I didn't want to do it, and I'm not doing this for me. Right? I'm definitely doing it for them and the people here in the state of Maine. If they want me, God bless, I'll do his job. If they don't, fine. My life will go on. But I was watching the movie King David, or the series King David on Netflix, and it was this episode where I had where he was going to slay Goliath. I had Elliot on one knee and I had Mary on the other knee, and they're watching, and then Elliot's like, Papa, he's gonna tear him apart. This guy's so big. I said, don't worry, Elliot, he's gonna win. No, Papa, he's not. And
a spoiler alert, like giving away the ending here.
And so he throws one spear at him and misses another spear at him. He goes, look, I told you. And then he throws the third spear and he clips him and knocks him down to the ground, and he's bleeding. He says, look, he's going to get him. I said, Elliot, he's nice. He says, how do you know? I said, it's in the Bible.
He goes, I read the original.
He goes, he's only got a stone, and he's looking at me like his eyes are, he's engaged, and Mary's just sitting there with her eyes wide open, and she, and then he goes running at him with the stone, and he whacks him in the head and takes him down and kills Goliath, and he's looking at me like, wow. And then Mary looks at me and says, Papa, why are there bad guys in the world? I said, I don't know. Why do you think there's bad guys in the world? She goes, but why do you want to fight the bad guys all the time? I said, there's always going to be bad guys, honey. She goes, but why do you want to fight them? And in my office, there's a picture of Braveheart in the battle scene with the kilt on, and I wore a kilt one time. And she still to this day thinks that's me in that
that sticks.
That picture.
That's a memorable image.
Yeah, right. And I said, so why do you think I want to fight the bad guys? She said, and looked at me like with these Cindy Lou Who eyes, and as sincere as, and she said, to make it a better place for me and all your other grandchildren. And I was like, oh, wow. That was powerful to me. It was like I was being told that this is something I have to do. If you can do it. And I for years I sit on a show and I talk about get off your couch, go down and vote. You got 30 days prior to election. I don't care what election is or what it's going on. You should have a civic duty to get up and go out and vote. And you can't tell me that every citizen in the state of Maine doesn't pass their town hall once in 30 days. All right, so this is an absolute must for us. And if we don't stop, smell the roses, jump up and say, look, this is where we're going to help. We're going to work together. We're not going to fight amongst ourselves. We're going to run on issues. We're going to talk about pocketbook issues. You can talk about all these other issues. They're not going to work for me. I want to win. I want to win for the people. I want to make sure that they have the opportunity, and I want to make sure that my grandkids have that opportunity that I've had in life. Someone said to David one day, hey, I believe in you. And instead of me just walking away from it, I worked my tail off, and I made a life for myself. And the only difference between me and my friends is that I went to the bank and they went to the bar. And, that's reality. So you make choices. Life's about choices. But, when I saw that my granddaughter looked at me that day, I was in awe. I really, up to that moment, Steve, I really thought, no way I'm going to do this. But there have been other things besides that encouraged me. And I said, I'm going to practice what I preach. I'm doing this, and it's not for my ego. I have no ego. I can tell you I left that at the door a long time ago. You have ups and downs in life, and you get to a point where it's like you're seasoned. And this is all about, well, if you think you can do it, do it. And whether it's a local office, I tell people all the time, great, I want you to donate to my campaign. I really do. But if it's a choice between me and your local House or Senate seat, give them that money. All right, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out a way to make it work. But those House and Senate seats are so important because you get a guy like me elected, and then you get you sitting up there as a lame duck where you don't have the House or the Senate. All right, it's going to be a tough road to hoe. But again, I think I could still work within that environment, and how successful I would be determined. I hope I'm not in that situation, but I think having control of the House, the Senate, and the gubernatorial office would be, would be great. It would be great for Maine. It would be absolutely great for Maine because we would get done the things that need to be done. And it's not like it's rocket scientists.
No, but do you think? I know Governor LePage had that, comes in on the 2010 Tea Party wave, gets the trifecta. And I don't think that conservatives in the state were ready. I don't think that they
knew what to do with it.
No. Thankfully, John Martin's not around anymore to scheme against the future Republican governor.
Sure.
I wish him the best.
He was a soldier for his causes.
He was. Yeah, I'm sure.
He
was a great guy
to serve. Look, there's not all Democrats are evil. I hear people say it all. They're like, listen, let's put the names saying aside.
But at the same time, and if we're talking about fighting bad people, there are some bad people.
There are.
There are people who view state government as a path to their own wealth, to their own self-aggrandizement.
That person shouldn't be in office.
Well, it's not just people who are in office. It's people who are rent-seeking businesses, lobbyists, people who are trying to convince the government to do things for their own personal, private, narrow interest rather than the broader interests
hidden
for the state
agendas.
Of Maine. And those are the people who are It's like you've got the three branches of government that you've talked about, the executive branch, legislative branch, and then the judiciary, which is almost a lost cause. We don't even want to think about the judiciary for 10 years from now.
I sued Janet Mills. I don't know if you know that. That was my lawsuit.
Yes.
I put that together.
Lance has been a big disappointment.
He was appointed by Trump. I mean, and he still didn't do his job. But, so that just goes to show that, it doesn't matter. It's just what happens. I was shocked that we were given the verdict we were with that, but we were right. But they ruled against us for whatever reason.
But fixing the courts is, it's like fifth or sixth on the list of things that need to happen in Maine. But where I was going is that there's also, I think, a fourth branch and a fifth branch that's kind of unspoken and not outlined in the Constitution. The fourth branch is the state employees, the legacy bureaucracy. Some of these employees, like, I'll give you an example. Anya Trundy, Deputy Finance Commissioner, going to be in the government forever. And she openly admits in legislative testimony to breaking the law, to withholding documents that were supposed to be given to a legislative committee, and she suffers no consequences whatsoever.
Why? Judicial branch doesn't hold them.
Judicial branch, lack of leadership, lack of consequences given from the Attorney General's office.
Right.
A total, just like a culture in this fourth branch of government
the
of
rules
immunity and
me.
impunity.
Right?
Protections from the unions. Protections from the unions. But so you've got this fourth branch of government where these people are more powerful, I would say, than some state house rep. Because they're the ones who are going and briefing the committees. And if you can lie to a legislative committee and manipulate the information that they have, well, you're wielding undemocratic power over an elected representative. Like that she should be locked up.
Absolutely.
And I hate to say that, but
like the law, you go to jail.
She broke the law. She's like actively subverting democracy, and the idea that there's everyone just shrugs that off, and the media doesn't pay attention to it. Like she should be facing harsh consequences.
Here's the problem you have with that, Steve, is that the people don't believe it's true. Right? They think it's Republican propaganda. They think, they don't want to believe the truth because they're so jaded.
Yeah.
And I think it's sad. I think every person in public office, whether they're getting paid,
go ask Senator Hickman about it. Because I think the Democrats were just as concerned about the manipulation of information. But that's just to give an example. But the fourth branch of government, I think, is very powerful in the state, and Paul LePage dealt with that. It's kind of like
I'm not Paul LePage, though.
I know that, but you're like it's like
I
you're
like
taking,
Paul. He's a great guy. All right, but I'm different than Paul.
It's like you're taking over a real estate business and you've got 8,000 employees and they're all trying to see you fail, and they all want to undermine you. So it's a tremendous leadership challenge.
Yeah, I like challenges. I've been put to the test on everything in my life. Nothing's come easy for David Jones, but I'm ready. I know. Listen, I don't care, what your beliefs are. I think everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and let's find out where our common ground is. Let's work it out. So tell me, why do you feel like that? And then I'll tell you how I feel, and then maybe we can come up with a solution that works for everybody, and it's a win-win. There's going to be a good idea, whether it's a Republican, Democrat, unenrolled, doesn't matter. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. I don't care. And that's all there is to it. I'm not going to, poo-poo on some idea just because somebody from the other side came up with it. No. Listen, we're all Mainers. We have to find a way to make sure we work together and we do the work that Mainers expect us to do when they elect us to office. Nothing short of that. And, listen, my principles are my principles. I wouldn't compromise for all tea in China, anything I believe in. That's just, know that. That's anybody knows that David says David believes, and that's going to stay. So, but I am willing to listen to a good idea. All right, as long as it doesn't compromise my position and what I believe in life and what I think is best for other people, then I'm all in. So I think you have to. There has to be camaraderie. I say this a lot, but I really mean it. The days of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill were great days for America. And why can't we have great days for Maine? You've got the Speaker of the House and whoever that person is. Hopefully, it's a Republican. But you've got to be able to work together. When Paul was governor, there was a lot of back and forth. It was horrible, and he spent more time arguing with his own and
the current governor was his attorney general. Actively working to
subvert
subvert him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when you have that going on, then it's hard to lead. But then we're human beings. We come in a room, I sit you down, I sit down, and we talk about what's important to us. And say, how do we resolve it? Are we not capable of that conversation? Is it not possible for us to figure out common ground? And listen, all my life, I put together some pretty major real estate deals. I built some pretty major buildings and resorts and things like that. I did it, why did I do it? Only because one, I listen, and two, I'm willing to work together. And I think that's the key. I look forward to that day when I'm sitting there in the Blaine House and up at the Capitol building and
surrounded by that new big wall that you can see them building around the Blaine House.
Thing.
It's a big, beautiful
$4.5
wall.
million. We could have done a lot of other things, but it's done, right?
It still looks like they're plugging along.
The money's appropriate.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's like the 1,500 jobs that are funded but not filled, right?
Yeah.
Right, another slush fund.
Yeah.
So you got to go in. You got to systematically find out what the hell. All right, where's this money? How do you increase a budget by 65%? And it just doesn't make any sense to me. So they've proven to me that you really don't need the income tax, because the income tax, $2 billion a year you're taking, roughly somewhere thereabouts. So if you are added, $4.1 billion to the budget in 7 years. Do we need the income tax?
Yeah.
What's the money being spent on? The days of, urinating money away on solar fields and blowing the tops of mountains off. I can tell you that's done with David. There's nothing going to happen with that. It's dumb. I'm not against alternative fuels, but until it costs the consumer less or the same as what we're paying today to heat our house and turn the lights on and drive our car, and then there's nothing to talk about, right?
Yeah, allow them to compete in a free market.
Yeah, free market is the key.
Don't distort the free market with central planning.
Amen, brother. I am so with you.
We're seeing the consequences of it. There's a story we're working on in central Maine with an elderly woman who got signed up for solar. She didn't sign a contract. You might have heard George Hale and Rick Tyler talking about that.
Yeah, I heard about
that. But I know her attorney, and we're looking into it, and it's a real scandal.
She wants to get it taken off or something.
Well, no, she was basically scammed by one of these solar companies, and I think that there's a lot of that going on. And
where's the Attorney General, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. Where's the Attorney General on Chinese drug cartels taking over the state? Where's the Attorney General on Dominican fentanyl groups? Where's the Attorney General on anything? He's hiding in his soundproof office with his underling that he had in a relationship with, or writing an amicus brief to sue in West Virginia over suing ExxonMobil or something or whatever. I don't know. There's a total lack of leadership there. So I guess. Back to the 100 days, the first 100 days question. It sounds like your primary focus would be on the spending issues, the budget bill. It's like the biggest thing that the legislature is going to do. The budget bill kind of sets the foundation for 2 years of government. And so I guess you're very much interested in getting a handle on the tax and spending issue.
Well, DHHS is a big problem. I'd like to separate child services from DHHS. I think the organization's too big. They're wielding too much power. I think it can be broken up and make sure that the people that they hire are trained for the jobs that they're supposed to do. I think that's really, really important, that they're out there in the field and they know what they're doing. They're going into people's homes, and you got children's lives. With all these children have died unnecessarily. If one child dies, it's too many, but nothing's being talked about. Then they hire themselves to do an investigation about themselves to find out that they did nothing wrong. These kind of things just don't work with me. 2 + 2's got to make.
Or how about a letter of no confidence from hundreds of employees in a leader within the child welfare program, and the governor says no.
Or they
I'm
get rid of
unmoved,
the one
you know, I'm
person
unmoved by
resigns, and
that.
then who they put in their place. Right?
But yeah, the subordinate or
Right,
the
that
person
doesn't-
who's working at a nonprofit, just another bootlicker. I mean,
That's
HHS
not the way
alone
government's supposed to work. We're
seems like a big
supposed to
problem.
protect and serve, right? And I think that we're supposed to have a representative form of government. We're supposed to represent, the people. And when you see the votes on these bills, like the fuel choice bill, I just couldn't believe that. I was like, who would even put a bill like that up there? You're not going to be. You're going to tell a guy he spent $20,000 or $30,000 to put an energy efficient oil burner system in, that you're not going to let the oil company deliver there anymore? Yeah, good luck. All right. So, I mean, but the idea that it was split right down the middle, and then we had to really, rattle the cages of the representatives to go ahead and vote this thing. It did finally get stomped, and so it's gone. But that it never should have been a single vote for it. Yeah, I mean, what explanation could you give me, David Jones, about why you would support that bill? None. You can't. It's not defensible. And so I
So, I mean, global climate change. We're trying to change the weather. That's really the explanation.
You want to go there?
Like when you get it, no, I'm just saying. Like
Yeah,
when you get right down to it, like that's the argument that the progressive leftists from the coastal blue communities, the vacationer Maine. That's their argument is we're fighting climate change. So we need to force you to drive electric vehicles. We need to force you to not use oil. We need to subsidize solar panels and wind turbines. We're going to at the point of a gun, we're going to take money out of your paycheck and give it to the wind developers and the solar developers who aren't even in Maine, because we're trying to change the weather.
So they can,
that is their view.
So they can install those oil dripping windmills and destroy my scenic view of the ocean. Right? Yeah. No way in hell would I even begin. Thank God
that's the argument, though.
But and then where are the people that love trees? They'll blast the trees out of the woods and put solar fields. I drive Wilderness Highway down in Gray. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's lined, completely lined, that whole strip. It's called Wilderness Highway now. It was the bypass they did around Gray to go over to the Turnpike, and it's all solar fields. All right, you drive up in Augusta, all right, and alongside the Turnpike, what is it? Solar fields.
Made by Chinese slaves.
Permission? Did they get my permission, your permission, or anybody else's permission to do that? No, they just did it. Right? A little issue that I'm a little touchy on is like I like the chickadee plate, and people say, "Well, David, you got bigger fish to fry," and I agree, but it's representative of what they are willing to do. They disregard us. We voted against the flag with the pine tree and the star. All right. Then they said, we're going to put it on the license plate, and they did it. And they didn't even do that right.
That's democracy defender Shenna Bellows,
right.
Imposing her vision for the state on us. And a contract given to an out-of-state firm, a Canadian firm, to handle those. They didn't do it right, like you said. The license plate is misprinting, and
they're doing them all. I mean, if you see it on the top of the tree, I don't know if you ever looked at the top of the tree, but you know what it says, right? So you got that, and then, just the idea that the chickadee's the chickadee, right? But it's a statement by them to say that we don't care what you, the voter, or the people, the constituents that we're supposed to represent say. We're going to do what we want anyway. And I think that's wrong. Like there was a reason she got booed at the Moose Lottery, right? There was a reason people wouldn't let her talk.
Brutal.
Brutal. I think it was sad. I mean,
it was
really sad. I mean,
she did not handle that well.
No.
But in her defense, I can't believe I'm saying this. I don't know how you handle that well. She shouldn't have shown up.
She shouldn't have shown up. It's not her crowd.
Yeah, I was going to say, to think that anything other than being heckled and booed mercilessly for 5 minutes.
They wouldn't let her talk. She had to leave, right?
No, she eventually got up there and started, reading the names, and she was holding them hostage. Is what it was. Right. That's all she could say was, "I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna read these names until you, step in line." Even in that moment, all she could think of was coercion and blackmail in order to get her way.
I'm not going to read the list. I'm not going to read the names. Fine.
I don't know how she could have handled that better.
Yeah, I think it's sad when it gets to that point. Look, but Mainers are really smart. One thing I learned here in 40 years being in Maine is that Mainers can read you like a book. They read your eyes, they read your movements, they read everything you say, they listen to the words you say, and if you lie, it's going to come out. If you lie, they're going to say you're a liar. Years ago when I was up in just moved to Bingham, I got involved with Chamber of Commerce there. And so I went to the meeting to introduce myself, and so they said, "Hi, this is David Jones, just moved up here." And it was probably 25 people. It was probably the biggest meeting they had because it was the first time they had, somebody from away that was involved in it. And I used to love the away jokes, but I became, I embraced them. And I was saying, well, my name is David Jones. I live in the big yellow house over there off Route 6. Stop right there, this guy. And it was Bobby Jakes. He stood up. He says, "You're not telling the truth." He says, "That's a lie." He says, "You live in the big yellow mansion. My friend lives in the big yellow house." And I said, "Oh, I didn't want to use the word mansion."
I didn't realize there were any mansions in Bingham.
It's a mansion. It's a mansion. It was built by James Leon Williams. He was the inventor of True Bite technology for dentures.
Oh, okay.
He was a dentist at the Queen of England. He was born in Emden, Maine. Yeah, and so it was his house. And it was quite a house. I bought the house. I paid like $375 for it, back at 60 acres of land and 3/4 of a mile riverfront, and it was a beautiful, beautiful house and needed a lot of work. But that's what I do. I love taking things and fixing them. But it was funny that I didn't want to be saying mansion. I felt uncomfortable saying the word mansion, but they wanted me to make sure that I said the mansion.
Yeah,
that's
they
what
smelled
everybody
it
in
on
town.
you. Yeah.
Everybody in town knew, and for that, I was like, "Oh, okay, I live in a mansion." Right? But when you talk to people in Maine, any rural town, first district, second district, it doesn't matter. There are plenty of rural towns in the first district, right? And you hear what they have to say. They believe in America. They love America. They want to be free. They don't want anybody telling them what to do. They don't want government in their lives. A lot of areas, they've been so long on, main care that it's just a way of life. It's generational now, and the welfare is just, I'm kind of like a work fair for welfare. Let's step everybody out. Let's make sure the opportunities are there for them to have jobs in the area they want to live in.
Yeah.
You got to encourage these businesses to open, and that's what I'm about. I want to see Maine. I know people say there's two Maines. To me, there's one Maine. All right, but and I want everybody in Maine to have an opportunity. And the only way you're going to have that opportunity is to get the government the hell out of the way, get rid of these rules and regulations that inhibit businesses from coming here. All right, find a way to have cheaper energy, and get people to live here and create jobs. If someone reaches into their pocket, and this is what I think the Democrats prey on a lot, which bugs me. Like when somebody invests money, when you reach into your pocket and you invest it in something, if it fails, no one's going to come rushing to your aid and say, "Oh, hey, don't worry, Steve, I'll give you your money back."
Unless you're a Wall Street firm. If you're a Wall Street firm, you might get a
Well, we're not.
bailout.
We're just people, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to encourage people to invest, and the only way you do that is not have a pendulum. All right, where it's one governor says one thing, the next governor says another. Legislature, you got to make things the law. All right, you got to get rid of these laws that inhibit growth in Maine. I've talked to companies. There's people that want to be here. It's vacation land for a reason. We got so many. 80% of the state's trees. So it's not like we're going to miss a few trees. Not for tearing down all our woods and putting massive developments and not having any trees in Maine. But we need people. And we need people, we need businesses, and with businesses we have jobs, and then we have an economy. And
there's no reason Maine couldn't have a tech sector except for our taxes. Except for our taxes.
No reason.
You could have server farms that take advantage of the cold season in Maine. There's a cost advantage there, but we've got high taxes and high energy.
Yeah.
So if you're making an Excel spreadsheet of what's our cost of operating in these different jurisdictions, you look at the energy, you look at the taxes, and you say, "Nope, not Maine.
Not going to do it."
We've gone in the wrong direction.
Yeah, Loring Air Force Base, what they're doing up there now, that's coming to life.
What they're trying to do.
They're trying to do, yeah. But it's always a struggle, right?
Yeah.
Energy supply. Why not have mini nukes? Everyone else approves it, but now they work. They're safe. We can do this. So why can't we do it? Why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we already making moves? With the AI, we need power. I mean, AI is amazing.
Yeah, and I think a Republican governor. The thing that I've always heard, and I know Representative Reagan Paul's been one of almost the only advocates for nuclear power in the state legislature. But she's been very committed to advocating for nuclear power. And in those debates, they always say, "Well, the cost of nuclear power is just so much." It's like, no, you've artificially created the costs by regulatory barriers. If you had a Republican governor and who could go to President Trump and say, look, I want to do a moonshot for nuclear power in New England and fast track regulatory approvals and get this done, it could happen.
Oh, I know it can happen.
If you tear down those regulatory barriers, like it can happen. And guess what? Like 40% of our power comes from nuclear already, from Seabrook, from New Hampshire. We're importing nuclear power right now. Southern Maine runs on nuclear power.
Yeah. Well, and so why can't we do it here? Why aren't we doing it here? Those mini nukes are easy to set up. They did it in France. I think they have a lot of them. They're doing some of them even California has.
They're having to fight over the Morro Bay nuclear plant out there.
But
the answer is
happen.
if you build the nuclear and if you include the nuclear in our regional greenhouse gas initiative, the RGGI program, there's no reason for solar panels and wind turbines because you've got your clean energy. You've got your clean, affordable nuclear energy.
You know what we can do? We let the tops of those mountains grow trees again. Take down these oil-dripping travesties that are sticking up there. I can look at it every time I drive up Route 26 to Bryant Pond. I can get rid of all those solar fields, and I can rent a D8 and I can do it myself and just bulldoze them right out of the way and plant trees and have trees again. You want trees? Get rid of these stupid ideas. They don't work. We already know they don't work. And so I'm all in on making sure we can get.
Be careful about bulldozing them though, because they're rich with cadmium telefluoride and PFAS. There's so many toxic chemicals that we've introduced into the environment in the name of saving the environment that we have to be careful that we don't destroy the environment.
Well, that's not my intention.
I know. But I mean, it's a real problem though. Now that you've incentivized the proliferation of these solar panels, what do you do?
It's drying up though. Now they're saying.
Good.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Good. I mean, are they even generating energy? I know there's been some.
How do they generate energy when they're covered with snow?
Well, exactly. I mean, they don't. Is the question?
I think alternative fuels are maybe 3 or 4% of our energy that was generated from alternatives.
Yeah, it's barely. That's like at the top. That's like at the top of the.
It's about 3 or 4%
renewables.
Matt Jacobson. I don't know if you know Matt, but he's pretty smart on energy. We have him all the time, and every Tuesday morning he's educating me on the right ways to go. And then natural gas. We lost Dragon Concrete, great company, because the town wouldn't let them put in the natural gas pipeline to their factory, and that's a big loss. That's a big loss. Now, will they ever come around? Look, I can tell you, I think natural gas is probably the best means we have right now for heating our homes. I have houses with heat pumps in them, and they're fine. But if the power goes out, you're out of luck. Yeah, right? You're out of luck.
When has the power ever gone out in Maine? We don't have to worry about that. But, and I think we hinted at this earlier though. But you can allow for energy choice. Right, you can allow for a competition, free markets, market forces to drive down the price and allow free human choice to dictate whether they want gas or nuclear. Do they want to be totally dependent on electric? Do they want a gas line? You can just allow that competition, and everyone benefits from it. But there's this progressive impulse to determine, no, we know what's best
for you.
Yes.
We're going to tell you what to do.
You must be deprived of your choice to vote for Donald Trump. You must be deprived of your choice to have oil or natural gas. Yeah. It's a very, very strange
we're not going to have gas cars anymore. What did they propose, 2030 or something?
They were going to mandate that car dealerships have to sell a certain blend of electric vehicles. It was the buy your car in New Hampshire program. Is essentially what really they were doing.
And what are they going to do? Stop the cars? We have 40 million people a year that visit the state of Maine, right? Yeah. 40 million people. Right? If we could just get 2% of them every year, it would become residents. But what's the lure? Higher taxes, income tax through the roof. 8.94%. What is she thinking? The idea of increasing our income tax.
It's crazy.
How many people?
6 months in a day.
I know two guys
6 months in a day.
That are very wealthy guys that said that was it. They packed up and they moved to Florida. 6 months in a day, I'm out of here. They still own a house. They're going to get hammered with their property taxes, but they're fine with that. They're not getting my income tax. So and you look at the people that have of wealth. People of wealth have choices. They don't have to be here.
And they have accountants.
Yeah, they have they have
accountants. It's escaping the individual income tax in a way that's totally legal is not rocket science. And when you start to get up for if we're talking about like 2%, 3%, 4%, maybe they don't really care.
Yeah.
But you get up to where we are, you get up above 5%, then people are like, all right, I don't want to go to that state to work because I'm going to take an 8% pay cut. I don't want to, have my tax domicile in that state for 9 months out of the year because
That's right.
I'm going to take a huge hit out of my income. But
and when you're struggling, I mean, like you look at the per capita income, New Hampshire, I think they make about $19,500 more per household per year than Mainers do, right? So what population? It's a smaller state, granted. We got a massive state. We're 30,500 square miles of land. There's 31,000 square miles in the entire, all of New England combined, less Maine. So you can fit all those states inside of our state, basically, is what it boils down to. And so it's a tougher state to take care of. The only way it works is, you have more people here and you have businesses here so you can keep our roads and bridges and everything intact. And that's all there is to it. And if you don't have that economy, then it's always going to be, people like Janet Mills and her cronies, open up that spinal tap and squeezing more dollars out of us. And
not always,
but
not always. Things that can't continue won't.
Yeah, well, it's
there's
unsustainable.
Yeah, I mean that's we get back to
right?
the event horizon of the black hole that we're kind of spinning around. Eventually the society breaks.
Look at the amount of multimillionaires we have here in Maine. Last I heard, there used to be like 2,700 multimillionaires here living in the state. Now we have, right at 200. Where are they? Do you think they don't own real estate here anymore?
No, they just.
Where's their residency?
Maybe
Florida, Wyoming,
it's Florida, Tennessee. Yeah,
right, they're out. They say, I'm out. I have options.
They've tax optimized, which, as far as I'm concerned, is your patriotic duty to tax optimize because you're rewarding good government policy. Right. Like you are the best person for allocating your money, not the government, regardless of what they believe.
So money in my pocket is going to do a lot better than that. I mean, the things they spend my money on infuriate me, and it should infuriate every young man and woman right now. And I'm hoping that we wake these people up and say, "Listen, guys, I don't care what your teacher told you in your DEI class, and this is numbers, this is math, this is science. Numbers don't lie, people do. Right? So do the math, figure out what the hell's wrong, and every time each week. Now you got that family leave program, right?
The paycheck tax.
Yeah, right.
the 1% tax on paychecks that they celebrated the start of. Yeah,
it's going to go to it has to, in order to sustain it. It's got to go to 3 to 5%. I'll bet by the time they're done with it. So they just got to get rid of it. I mean, I've had people call me, how the hell? No, a person comes to work for me today, works for me for a week, and then says, I have to go. I have a sick family member over there.
Oh, come on. No, it's like my neighbor's got a cat that has diabetes and needs emotional support. So I'm taking 12 weeks leave, and you've got to pay me 75% of my
And what
wage
does that do for an employer?
Wrexham.
It's out of here. I'll see you later, right?
Yeah, and they say that there's some process where you can dispute that as with the Department of Labor, but we have like leftist, like actual communists at the Department of Labor who are hunting down small businesses to try to punish them in ways that are just anti-private sector and totally un-American and unfair.
Well, they are communists, and
they are out communists
unabashedly.
Yes,
right.
Yes,
which is really, there's nothing wrong with patriotism. There's nothing wrong with loving red, white, and blue, right? Nothing wrong with loving your country and caring about your country. But to sit there and tell you you'd rather have a star and sickle, I'm sorry, you're off my list. You're done, right? Any practice towards socialism. Socialism is a first step to communism. Bottom line, it doesn't work. You've seen all these communist countries; they fail. That's all there is to it. China's a pseudo-communist, so they get the people, corralled in such a way that, they got 1.5 billion people, and it's kind of a mishmash of capitalism now. I mean,
I would say it's a communist cult leadership that has weaponized capitalism and tried to control capitalism. But I mean, even they're failing. Like I don't believe any economic numbers.
No, but their numbers are bad. I mean, they're really having serious, which is also very dangerous. first, but I don't want to talk too much about China, but like when you can't add 2 plus 2 and come up with 4 and you come up with 3, which is where I think we are here in Maine. We're spending more than we have, and we're spending money foolishly on dumb things that don't matter to me, and and I'm sure they don't matter to you and anybody else that I know that has any common sense. Then you just have to stand up and stop it, and the only way you do it is through a vote. Right? You look at, the thing that bothers me too is Clean Elections Act. It's like welfare for politicians. I mean, I'm familiar. Think about that. Look, I raised a decent amount of money in just 10 days. Because I jumped in right at the end of the month. But we raised $150,000, like that, right? And we got probably another 50, 60,000 that we raised in pledges on top of that. So the money's there. People are willing to spend it. Why do you have to go clean elections? So David Jones goes out and he works hard because, it's hard for me to ask people for money. I've been always the one that's usually writing a check and helping somebody. But, now it's the roles reversed. This is my job interview and I need a lot of money in order to get it. So I have to ask people for money, right? And I go out there and I bust my butt to raise the money I need to run a campaign, to run a good campaign, and we're going to run a good campaign. And then this person who runs Clean Election collects a few $5 checks, and they get, $1.8 million or something? I mean, is that the way it's supposed to be? I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's right. And unless the only way anything like that would even work is if you had no private money and everyone had raised their hand and got the money. I don't know. Even that I don't like. It's welfare. It's government.
Well, it's also it's totally scammed. They'll put clean election candidates up that don't stand a chance of winning,
exactly,
just so that they can collect the money and spend it in a different race. So it's one big scam.
Yeah.
And this was maybe 10 years ago. We did a FOIA request to find the how many people file their tax returns and check the box to give $1 to the Maine Clean Elections Act, because we were taking this as a pretty good indication of whether or not people support the program.
Right.
Are you willing to give $1 to support Maine Clean Elections? And it was like 86% of tax filers said no, we're not checking this little box to give you $1. Yeah, exactly. Or they just don't. They don't want to support the program. But I think it's it's so entrenched at this point. It's like
Well, I think it's
there's
wrong.
so many Republicans who have taken the money, and it gets back to the what I was talking about with conservative business owners.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean the productive class, the productive class pays for everything. But I think the Clean Elections Act, it needs to go, but it's like on the list of problems we have. One that I want to talk with before we let you out of here is the law enforcement and the addiction crisis in Maine. The fentanyl crisis, the Mills administration has basically made overdoses more survivable by handing out Narcan. That's the only measure of success that they can have.
That's it.
We've got the opioid settlement money.
They're not solving the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
They're putting a Band-Aid on as usual, right?
They're just changing the statistics.
Then what do they do with that, Steve? They use that as a fundraiser, right? To get more votes and get more money.
And the companies that make Narcan are doing very well.
Yeah.
But the property crime, the quality of life that spirals outward from an addiction crisis is still there.
Yeah.
The law enforcement challenges are still there. If anything, the law enforcement challenges have gotten worse because the treatment options and the ability to have some kind of compelled treatment has really gone away. We talked about it with the Sanford police chief the other day in here.
Yep.
And, he's arresting people who have been arrested 23 times, just in and out.
23 times, and he gets right in back out on the street again.
And it's all like
Why?
all the crime in Maine is orbiting drug addiction, and all the Narcan has done is made sure that it's more survivable to overdose 12, 15, 20 times. So I guess what do you think ultimately the state's approach to the opioid crisis should be, and what do you see as how would law enforcement change under Governor Jones?
Well, under Governor Jones, law enforcement would be able to do their job. Right, I would not stand in their way. You hire people to do a job. I'm not a micromanager, but I would hire good guys. They care about their job, care about their country, care about the people they're supposed to protect and to serve. And like when you hinder their ability to go ahead and do their job and say, "Well, stand down," sorry, that doesn't work with David. I believe that if you break the law, you pay the crime, you pay the price, whatever it is. Right, and it's simple, really. And if you get a guy that's, like, if a guy's dealing dope and he's out there on the street and he's peddling, and you bust him, you don't put him back out on the street. Keep him in jail. I mean, prosecute him. But no, it's, oh, well, he's a victim. Right. He's a victim in life. Huh? Everybody's a victim. Well, look, what about all the people that died with needles in their arms? What about these? I talked to Mark Dion, and after he became governor,
mayor of Portland.
Mayor of Portland. And I've known Mark for years, and I say, hey, Mark, what's it like? He goes, he says, I cleaned up the homeless situation. He says, it was horrible. He says, it was unbelievable, the stuff that I saw. He says, people laying there with needles in their arms, passed out, and rats eating their flesh. I'm like, is that what we want for Portland, Maine? Is that what we want for Maine? Is that what we want for America? So you've just got to have the laws. You got to be willing to enforce them, and you got to be able to let the law enforcement officers do their job. Please let them do their job. The idea to stand down from ICE, they're trying to deport criminals, right? People that broke the law, that should not be here. The first thing they did was break the law by coming in the country illegally, right? And now they're, part of MS-13 or running drugs or, acting as a coyote or a mule for, human trafficking. I mean, get them out of here. Why in God's name do we want them here? Why would any sane person advocate for them being here? It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
I think the people who support who go to fundraisers for Shelley Pingree's daughter. They don't see the addiction crisis.
Go out on the street. How do you not see it?
But they're not there. If you're on Mount Desert Island, there's no homeless. There's no homeless encampments on Mount Desert Island, right? There's no homeless encampments in Camden Rockport. There's no homeless encampments in Cape Elizabeth.
No,
where the wealthy Democrat enclaves are. And if you're not having to, see it firsthand, if you're not having your car broken into by someone who's trying to feed their addiction, then it's not a front and center issue for you. You can afford to vote like climate change is the biggest threat to humanity if you're not worried about fentanyl addicts breaking into your house.
Yeah, this victim thing doesn't work for me. All right, like you're born with 10 toes, 10 fingers, and hopefully a functioning brain. If not, then we want to help you, right? But if you're like the average person on the street, you know right from wrong. I don't care whether your parents are good or bad. You still know what's right and you know what's wrong. And so, just accountability. And what's right now, people don't feel like they can be held accountable for anything. And I just don't understand it. For when I was a kid, if you broke the law, you got in trouble. All right, you paid the price. All right, now it's like, oh, don't worry. Don't worry, Steve. You're a good guy. I know you didn't really mean to do it, but we're going to give you a break this time, and the next time, 23 times down the road, we understand that you're a victim, right? I'm sorry. You break the law, you pay the price, and if people know that you break the law, and when they break the law, that they're going to have to pay the price, they're not going to do it. And I'll tell you how I know that. I was in Singapore. I spent a lot of time in Singapore, and
they have very aggressive drug laws and gum chewing laws.
It says right on. Oh yeah, it says right on your visa when you come in. The possession of drugs in Singapore is punishable by death. It says it in Thailand as well.
I still know people who did drugs in Singapore,
but
you're a lot more sneaky about it, right? Sure. You're not going to be doing it out in the streets,
right? Exactly. Yeah. You never saw a police officer, never, right? They were all there, but they were watching you. And if you broke the law, like they have a thing down there called bullying, people get in a fight when they're bumping each other in a car or something. They come out of nowhere, right? So, but they enforce it, and then and there's a price to pay. They don't have the crime. Why? Because they know that there's a price to pay for committing the crime. Here, people now they're walking around with calculators inside stores so they don't go over the $925 amount so they don't get arrested.
Oh yeah, in California.
Think of that. They walk in there with a calculator and that steak is that. That's that. All right, and then they walk out with a bag full of food, an armful of food.
They tried to do that here.
Yeah.
They tried to pass the exact same thing in California here.
Yeah. Think of that. Now, listen, common sense has to apply. And again, people your age, and those around that need to step up, and they need to know that whoever you put in the Blaine House, whoever you put in the House, whoever you put in the Senate, are the ones that are going to make the rules, right? And they have to know that their vote counts. And they don't believe their vote counts. So many people do not believe that going there and voting, it matters. It matters so much. We lost seats in the House by 3 votes. I mean, come on. That's it, 3 votes. I think we lost a couple one time for 1 vote, right? So that matters. You getting off the couch, driving by the town hall, filling out an absentee ballot. What? You got 30 days prior to the election day. That's all you have to do.
Well, yeah, that.
And if you don't know,
we have same day registration now.
Yeah, we have same day registration.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse not to vote. In Iraq, people that were, they would have to go vote, right? And they had to stick their thumb inside the ink jar with the purple dye, and then they go outside, and the sniper would kill them because they voted, right? So we don't get shot when we vote here, right? They did, and they still went because they believed they could make a difference, and they sacrificed their life, knowing they knew they were in danger doing it. It wasn't like a lot of people got shot. Well, we don't get shot when we do it. So all you got to do is, put your imbibe down, whatever you're drinking, get in your car, start the engine, drive over to town hall, fill out an absentee ballot and hand it right to them if it's up to 30 days prior, or go on election day and vote. And so there's no reason not to. And if we don't vote, we get what we deserve. And we've gotten what we deserve because so many people did not vote. And it's sad. I mean, you deal with it every day, right? I mean, you see it. You're out there. You see the triads doing their thing with the drugs. What you do is again, I want to commend you for the work you've been doing. I just think it's amazing.
That.
I've watched your stuff. I just like, wow. Finally, we got a guy.
That cares. I mean, it's a big problem, and I think it's bigger than any one race or a candidacy or one person, and it's going to take a long time to, I think, alter the trajectory that Maine's on. I asked this question of all gubernatorial nominees that come in here to do an interview. And it's, are you going to be, a Poliquin or a Les Otten? And you brought up Matt Jacobson. I would put him in the Poliquin side of the equation too, because he's still active and involved. And this is not necessarily to disparage Les Otten, but in 2010, like in 2026, we have this brawling Republican election with lots of candidates, and everybody is telling you, I'm so invested in Maine. I know I've got these good ideas. Like I'm committed to Maine. And some of those candidates stuck around, even though Paul won the primary and became involved and are still involved in the fight. And then some of those candidates said, well, if I don't get to be the top guy, I'm out of here. So I guess the question is, do you see, is this something that you're committed to being involved in a big way, regardless of who's at the top of the Republican ticket? Or is this like, if it's not the Governor Jones show, I don't know if I'm as interested?
No, look, the day after the primary, if I'm not the person, I'm going to be at their door trying to help them. I've been that guy already. In 2016, I got behind President Trump in a big way. I created the Make Maine Great Again Super PAC, first ever Super PAC in the history of Maine. I did that.
Are you going to get the Trump endorsement?
Oh, we'll find out.
Yeah.
We're going to work for that. Listen, there's nobody really, if you look at all the candidates, I don't care who it is, in or out, or thinking about getting, right? There's nobody that's been tried and true to the Trump agenda as I have.
Yeah, I would say you probably very, very early on, laid claim to supporting him. Yeah.
Well, the day
you guys have the same real estate businessman
two peas in a
type
pod
vibes.
in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm a little bit less rash, or I've talked to Trump. He's a great guy, and he's very soft spoken when you talk to him. And I've been on stage with him for 6 rallies, everyone here in Maine. I sat right behind him watching him, and I watched how every person in that room was, just elevated.
He's got great comedic timing. He's the funniest president we've ever had.
Funny, but he's serious, I remember in the early ones, there was no teleprompters. He always just spoke, and he'd go on for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and but every person in that room felt as though he had talked to them, and that's a talent, and he does. I'll tell you, my cousin Mike worked for him for 27 years. And I know a lot of people that built all his buildings in New York City as well. But Mike was the tile guy in Atlantic City that they said never got paid, which is a lie. He got paid every penny. And when they got done with AC, he asked them to go to New York and work on Trump Tower. He was at the point where he needed tile, and he asked Mike to go. And Mike said, Mr. Trump, I can't go. I got my kids in high school. He said, I'll pay you 2 times the money for you're getting paid for all your guys. I'll buy you all new trucks, and I'll give you a pension plan. All right. Goes home, tells his wife and Karen, and says, hey, Mr. Trump wants me to go to the AC, and this is what he wants to do. She goes, you haven't left yet? Right? So to the AC he goes. And to New York. He leaves AC, goes to New York. And he was working with Trump side by side for all the time. And so when he came down that escalator and all that work there, I knew the guy that did that. But, when Mike retired, it was just a couple of years ago, he went to his mailbox, and there was a check in there for $5,500. And he's like, what the hell is this? He put it in the bank and cleared. And the next month, another check came, and he figured out, went online to figure out what it was. It was the pension plan. Trump never forgot. And that's Trump. And everyone I know that worked with him, and I know some of the guys pretty well that did all his stuff in New York City, and they said the same thing. When we wanted to find Trump, where do we find him? Talking with the guys. All right. Friday he'd come, bring, beer and soda and pizza, and sit down, take his suit off, and just, sit there and talk with the guys on the job sites. That leadership, Reagan was like that too. He would go down into the halls and joke and cajole with all the different people inside the hall, whether Republican or Democrat. And when it came time to vote, they supported him because they believed in the man. Right? And so that's a special type of leader. I like to think that's how I would be. You wouldn't see me shielded. I'd be walking around the halls. I'll be down there talking to people. I want to know what's going on. Want to hear what they're thinking. I've had an open door policy my whole life. My phone rings, I answer it. Right? If I don't answer it, I call you right back. In the real estate business, if you don't do that, you don't get the deal, right? But I am always on call, and I think the governor has to be that person. Has to be that person that can say, you know what, I like you, I like what your ideas are, and let's see what we can do to make it work. And that leadership skill is something I watched with Trump. I saw him do it. I've watched him how he would command the crowds and then say, hey, I don't know why everybody's so upset. I'm only doing what I said I would do. So
that's a remarkable thing for politicians these days. Doing what they said they were going to do.
Oh, I always joke on air. I say, look, I don't know what happens. I say, I'm speaking to them. I say, you go up there, you get elected, you go into the chamber, they release the gas, and you forget everything you promised us. You can't do that. If I tell you yes, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to be yes. And I'm not going to walk across the hall and say no. All right? I make up my mind, but it's made. I listen, and when you listen to people, you hear, and you make good decisions. And hopefully, you make all good decisions. But the odds are against you that you're not going to. You look at Babe Ruth; he struck out more times in bat than him and Hank Aaron, the two of them, than anybody would ever imagine. But do you think of them as strikeout kings? You think of home run hitters. Why did they hit? Because they got up to bat. I want to get up to bat. I want to be the governor of Maine. I want to make sure that the people that work with me feel included and that we all work together to make Maine great again.
David, where people want to follow you or give money to support your campaign, learn more about your candidacy, get involved, I presume you have a website, you have some social media presence? How do people get in touch
Well,
with
we
you?
have Facebook. It's David Jones for Governor. We have our website, which is jones2026.com. There's a lot of information there. It's, I think, a little bit more than you'll find with most other people. There's things in my positions page, which is pretty interesting, of what I would have supported, what I wouldn't have supported if I were governor of the state of Maine. So I kind of help, mold that. There's some links to some interviews I've done, and again, I really appreciate you allowing me the time to come in here and talk.
Of course, I appreciate you coming in and having the an open, uninhibited, unscripted conversation. I feel like it's the best way, whether it's somebody I agree with or disagree with about whatever the issue is, or all of the issues. It's the best way for voters and people in the state to learn. To take the measure of a man is just to see get to be a fly on the wall for a conversation about some of the things that are affecting their lives. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming in.
It's so important. I don't script anything. Right? To go into a meeting and meet with folks, whether here or it's a committee meeting or whatever, I just don't read that. If I wrote I remember when the first couple of speeches I ever did in my life, when I was in school, I was the kind of guy who would skip school when I had to do a book report because I hated being in front of people. I obviously overcame that, but it was really hard for me to be in front of people when I was younger. And then the idea of reading from a script, I just think is fake. You ask me a question, I'm going to give you an answer. You might like it, you might not. You vote for me, great. You don't, hey, I understand. We're not all going to agree on everything. But at least when you got an answer from me, it came from the heart. And that's all there is to it. I have never in my life, I don't know, maybe because I'm not capable of reading off a script or something, but the bottom line for me is I just like to talk about the things that are important to me. And, this kind of conversation, I love it. This is my kind of conversation.
Well, fantastic, David. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.